This Pittsburgh Pirates team is in trouble. And not just this year. A change is needed. And today we're going to talk about it. Next on Locked On Pirates.
You are Locked On Pirates, your daily Pittsburgh Pirates podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Pirates. I'm Gary Morgan. And today, honestly, screw the game from last night. One more win or loss isn't changing any of this. This isn't a recap show. This is a show that needs to focus on bigger things, and that's what I intend to do today. First, I want to focus on the Pirates' obvious holes they had this offseason. Then we'll move into Jared Jones and Bubba Chandler, and we're going to finish up comparing Baltimore and Pittsburgh in their rebuild efforts. This entire offseason, fans, pundits, TV talking heads, radio hosts, podcasters like me, everyone has been parroting that this Pittsburgh Pirates team needed two bats, specifically a left fielder and a first baseman. And some were so bold as to suggest a shortstop too. We all felt that. We all said that. We all watched as they chose to address only one and then due to injury have that player not debut until this past weekend. Here's the thing though. After watching this team play this season, if that's what we're calling what they're doing, I've come to the belief that those two bats probably wouldn't have been enough. Now, that doesn't mean I think they shouldn't have gotten more. It just means nobody, and I mean nobody, none of us who were talking about it, thought they'd have guys like Brian Reynolds or O'Neal Cruz struggle quite to this degree. This was never going to be a good offense. I think it's safe to say that even as we called for those two-ish bats, we didn't see this turning into a top 10 offense. I think instead, most of us put our money on this pitching staff and figured if we can just be league average offensively, we might just have something here. Well, there is no league average in this offense if Reynolds and Cruz aren't both really good. Not doing okay, not just drawing walks and whatnot, but actually impacting baseballs, specifically providing power. This lineup just doesn't have any juice. Spencer Horwitz could legitimately be a very good player here. And if he is, we'll be happy they went and got him because he can be a real answer to position of need. But that's quite literally the only offensive component they brought in with any kind of purpose. I can't even give you Alexander Canario, who they traded for when he was placed on waivers. That's a move of opportunity and desperation. Desperation largely caused by your free agent answers to left field being Tommy Pham, who you can't squint hard enough to see as good at any aspect offensively. Point is, they needed to add a couple bats. But they also needed the bats they already had to at least resemble the players they've been. Cruz has for stretches anyway done his part, and I give him some grace for having jumped back in after a back flare-up that benched him for almost a week. And Reynolds is off to the worst start to a season in his career. We could play chicken or egg here a bit. Are they struggling because they're surrounded by bad hitters, or are they just part of the collection? I guess what I'm saying is now that Horwitz is back and fully acknowledging that Tommy Pham is on the bench with Canario starting almost every game in his spot, this team is Nick Gonzalez away from what this GM intended to be the full-strength starting lineup. When the team broke camp, this is what they expected, minus the Tommy Pham and Canario change, right? It doesn't feel like they're two bats away anymore, does it? Charrington was wrong for not getting those two to begin with. But I think it's fair to say we collectively were wrong about how much better position two bats would put them in. If Cruz and Reynolds get right, and Horwitz looks like an actual piece, and Gonzalez helps when he returns, it'll feel more doable heading into the offseason. But it must be acknowledged, good players start out cold in other cities too. They just don't have Tommy Pham and Adam Frazier surrounding them to make it through. At least not the teams that survive it. When I really think back to this offseason, I think about some of the names that reasonable Pirates fans put out there. You know, like Tyler O'Neill or Austin Hayes or Verdugo. You know, these aren't big names we're talking about. In fact, in some cases, they could have gotten away with spending less than they spent on Tommy Pham if they had just gone after these guys, you know, Verdugo especially. But I'm not sure that any of those would have provided enough offense for this to really look considerably different. I think that's where I'm stuck. If that's not the case, okay, well, you've got some other problems because you've got positions that you felt were filled, right? I just talked about how bad it is, like with O'Neill Cruz and Brian Reynolds, right? Well, you're not getting rid of either of those guys. Brian's signed long term. O'Neill Cruz is just entering arbitration next year. They're both offensive threats still. They're both players that other teams would want. They're both still what I think you would classify as good players. Just not playing very good. It's a lot to put on Donnie Kelly as far as changing how they're playing. But I'm not sure there's much anybody can do if those two don't. I still don't think Ben Cherington supported this team enough. I think that's clear as day. But I'm also saying, even if he listened to us, I'm not 100% sure they get where they need to get. This needs to be a league average offense. And you need to ride the pitching. The way they're constructed, that has to be the formula. They didn't do it. Bottom line, they didn't even try it. Tommy Pham and Adam Frazier are not even an attempt at that. Spencer Horwitz might work out well. He really might. But they are where they are right now. Probably too late for him to do anything to help this season. Now, if he's good, that changes the outlook a little bit for next year because you no longer have to look for a first baseman at least. But it's not a great situation to be in. And the GM not doing anything kind of made it that way. When we come back, we're going to pick up talking about Jared Jones and Bubba Chandler. Might even squeak in some Hunter Barco. Did you ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, or I guess eggs, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONMLB for half off your first year. All right, welcome back to Locked On Pirates. Hey, do me a favor, smash that subscribe button. Tell a friend about the show. I'm trying to do things a little bit differently than I think what I'm seeing on most of the shows where we're just complaining for half an hour here or there. I really want to try to dig a little deeper than that. We can get beyond the surface level, can't we? I think you guys are smart enough to do that. Jared Jones. Well, This was always a possibility. And I say that before we truly know anything other than Jared is headed for another consult with Dr. Keith Meisner. However you say his name, Meester. We'll say Meister. The same doctor who said there is little UCL damage and no immediate need for surgery. This was the result of his second opinion, and it was always going to be left on the table as an option. He'll see the doctor on Tuesday. This is after a late reported setback in his rehab. So let's talk this through a little bit. First, if he has full-on UCL, he'll miss the rest of this year and likely, and for practical purposes, all of 2026. I'm not even going to touch at this time how the 2027 season should be seen as shaky at best with the CBA expiring after 2026, but it's out there. I put it out there in the universe for you. Bottom line, if this is a partial, he could be on a shorter schedule, but not so much that you expect him to return full throttle in 2026. If it's full, well, we might not see him back until whenever, if ever, they start playing baseball in 2027. And he'll be immediately on arbitration. Now, couple this with the news that Hunter Barco was removed from a game after only 23 pitches. We don't know yet the extent of that, but he was drafted by the Pirates where he was expressly because he was recovering from UCL surgery. Otherwise, he would have been at the top of every team's board. Suddenly, all that young pitching we were supposed to be trading for, for bats, well, there aren't as many, are there? Funny how that works. The excitement about this rotation and all the young arms coming for me, it was never about pretending I knew a magical set of 5 that would ultimately get here and run roughshod through the league. It was about having so many that they can survive a couple injuries like this and have more still. Hindsight is never fair to use to justify anything. It's an advantage that decision makers don't get when they make a decision. And it's not fair to pretend it was super apparent after you've seen it play out. That said, Jared Jones eventually having to have UCL done was something just about everyone seemed to see coming. Physics just does not like someone with that frame throwing 100 miles an hour. And this is the party trick it ends up bringing. So when there was interest in Jones in the offseason, well, if there were legit offers, this kind of eventuality you'd hope would be going through your head. Keeping depth is great, but understanding what this team needed and how hard it was going to be to expect health from everyone, I'd hope that given a chance to improve your team, take advantage of a real talent and his value, coupled with the risk you have to see. I'm asking the guy to be a psychic, I guess. But on the other hand, I had myself so convinced this would happen at some point. I guess I just feel it would have been a good bet that you were both getting help from offloading the handling of the aspect of things and talent that you need back. Who knows, though? Maybe we wouldn't have even passed the physical. This did happen like super early in spring. It's a really good kid with a ton of fight in him. I have no doubt that he'll return eventually, and I equally have no doubt that he'll look great when he does. I feel for him too. He is one of the more intense competitors I've ever had the pleasure to talk to. It just oozes from him. He wants nothing to do with anything but targeting and destroying the challenge in front of him. I'm probably not the first person who kind of questioned how fast a pitch someone his size should try to live at. He trusts himself and works harder than most to achieve it. None of this is done without a doctor, okay? Unpopular opinion, the Pirates didn't screw this up. The doctor the Pirates are using, Meester, is widely used and widely respected. Not enough for me to know how to pronounce his name, but still, you get the point. If he thought a surgery was an absolute must, Jones would have gone under the knife back in April. I can tell you the player wanted to avoid it. I can tell you that wouldn't matter if there was no way to avoid it or no chance it was going to heal. We're talking about a month delay. It really doesn't change all that much as it pertains to his return date, unless, of course, he went from a partial procedure to a full UCL because it got worse, which even then would have been under the supervision of a doctor. I understand the environment, but in this case, I just don't think we need to pretend this is another thing Charrington messed up. He's done enough real stuff. We don't need to add tangents and pretend he's some all-powerful being that knows everything too. Now, why not call up Bubba Chandler? Well, let me tell you what. I'm fairly sure it isn't Super 2 or fear he's going to win the Rookie of the Year. I mean this in the most kind to Bubba way I possibly can, but he ain't Skeens. And they ignored both of those things for him. Now, if you're super cynical, I suppose you could say they learned their lesson since Paul won the Rookie of the Year, and they don't want to repeat the mistake and have Bubba awarded a year of service time, too. But honestly, that's such a long shot. I just can't fathom it, even for this management team. I'd also ask, with Charrington being every bit a lame duck, why would he actively not want to add a pitcher like this to help? The only version of the team that he's sure to supervise, this one. I mean, why would he be concerned with what happens 5 years from now when it's very likely another GM is going to be the one dealing with the problem? I still personally think he gets called up during this homestand that opened last night. But if he doesn't, well, I think there are some reasons, and I think they're baseball reasons. First things first, I'm not overly concerned that he hasn't eclipsed 5 innings yet. Some of it's by design. He does have very real innings count for 2025. And they've done this with similar talents, including Paul Skeens himself. That said, many of those 5 innings or less outings, his pitch count has gotten into kind of insane territory. Just yesterday or Sunday, he threw 86 pitches. 9 runners in 4.1 innings pitched. It came with 7 strikeouts too, which is a hell of a lot for 4.1 innings, but guys are making him work. And frankly, he's a bit wild, hitting the strike zone about 63% of the time, which can be fine if you're getting results. But guys won't chase to the same level up here that they do in the minors either. So it's a little bit of a concern. See, the thing is, the Pirates putting innings restrictions on him, well, they don't matter if he's going to be near 100 pitches by the 5th every game. Some outings have been way better than others, but 2 of his last 3 weren't exactly screaming, "Call me up, dummy." With the season being where it is, sure. I just want to get him up here and see him pitch too. But I think you should brace yourself because he comes up here and goes about walking guys at a 3.86 walk to 9 inning clip. Well, he'll be out of most games by the 5th. And that wouldn't be much different than the guy they'd likely replace in the rotation. His K through 9, 13.5 is exceptional. But the way he pitches, I think it's fair to expect this figure to go down a bit and the walks per 9 to increase a bit. Again, I want to see him, and I'm confident we will. But starting pitching hasn't really been the team's issue. And in my mind, he has a lot more cleanup to do. Now, that can and maybe should happen up here. But I think after, say, 4 or 5 times through the rotation, I bet it looks a lot like what Majinski has already put on the back of his baseball card. Many of his outings are either on Pittsburgh Sportsnet or they have been the free game of the week on MILB.com. It's an app you can download for your phone if you're looking for it. And he gets another shot in the minors. Please do watch him pitch. Not the highlights. I mean, actually watch him pitch. You could get one of his peak performances and I'll look like a dummy. Or you could see what I'm seeing and find yourself having a bit of hesitation on that call, at least immediately. Unless every hitter he faces up here is Javi Baez from a couple years ago, I'm going to be proven right on the walk and K totals. Guys up here simply aren't going to make the mistake that the competition he's currently facing does. Not regularly, anyway. And he doesn't get to face the Pirates in his debut like some other lucky rookies. You know what I mean? When we come back, it's time for a side-by-side comparison of the Orioles and Pirates and their rebuild efforts. All right, welcome back to Locked On Pirates. To me, the Baltimore Orioles and the Pittsburgh Pirates are opposite sides of the same coin. The Orioles can't pitch, the Pirates can't hit. Both went into a deep, dark rebuild, both drafted high repeatedly, both focused on bringing in as much talent as they possibly could. Both made trades to try to fill holes. Both don't like to spend money to fill them. Or can't, depending on which side of the reality fence you like to live on. The Orioles are 15-30. The Pirates are 15-32. Both teams fired their managers, Brandon Hyde and Derek Shelton. Both will likely move on from their GM. And one was recently sold to a new owner, who is just about as willing to spend as his predecessor. The Orioles have 4 pitchers in their top 10 prospect list, only one of them at the AAA level. The Pirates have 3 offensive players in their top 10 prospects list, only one of them at the AAA level and one in AA. Both of these teams need right now help, and I don't mean for this year, I mean to salvage their builds. I drool when I look at the Orioles' top prospects, or even just what their team can do offensively at the MLB level. And I'm sure Orioles fans look at Pittsburgh thinking exactly the opposite. I'd tell you these two teams would make great trade partners. And on the surface, they certainly do. But here's the thing. The perceived strength of each team, well, they aren't necessarily performing as such. The Orioles, with all that offensive talent, 24th in batting average at .231, just a couple spots above the Pirates, who are tied for dead last at .217. In other words, they might want and need more of that top-ranked offensive talent to come through yet from the minors. Now the Pirates, that daunted pitching staff, specifically starting pitching, even without Jarrett Jones, the Pirates come in 15th in starting pitching ERA at .387, and the Orioles are 29th with a .601 ERA. The Pirates, well, they could stand to improve, especially hitting the way they do, and they might want to use their internal structure to do so. The Orioles aren't going to take a lower-level starter, no matter how good they are, and the Pirates shouldn't take someone from their lower levels either. Both of these teams need things to change, even if this year has been wasted. Both of them have a path to correcting the deficiencies in their builds, but both of them need to have serious conversations about how they've managed to suck for as long as they did and only built one side of the equation. There are other teams out there for each to look at. I'm not pretending both are SOL because this isn't a clean match like you'd like it to be. But if anything, this is a lesson. No matter how incredible a rebuild looks, no matter how it looks like it's shaping up, with prospect load and talent, you still have to have success on both sides of the ball. You still have to develop and deploy them capably when you get to the MLB level. And more than anything, you have to have an understanding of what you have and haven't done well, and make moves to adjust to the realities of what your effort has produced. It's actually very normal for things to go this way. And so are the adjustments you need to make. Every team that's ever tried this has had to make at least one uncomfortable deal to see if they couldn't make a go of their construction. Sometimes it's a GM change and nothing more than fresh eyes help steer a ship back from the brink. Sometimes a new GM doesn't have the same allegiances to prospects that we've seen as untouchable before, and that opens a door for moves. From my perch in Pittsburgh, I've endlessly heard how much better the Orioles have done with their build, especially when compared to the Pirates. I'm not saying this to cut the sting of watching this team or to talk about how successful this effort will be. I'm simply saying this to illustrate that the path to a rebuild is rarely as good as it looks. And you almost never get where you wanted to go without making a fairly large adjustment somewhere along the line. This doesn't make it better. It's not intended to. The Orioles' Mark Elias has been the GM in Baltimore since 2019. He's done a great job, right? He even won MLB Executive of the Year in 2023. And folks, this pitching issue, it was very much so in play back then too. You could see it coming from a mile away. Much like Cherington, everyone and their mother assumed they'd trade some of their talent for the thing they need. And the Orioles did. But it was for help they couldn't keep. Corbin Burns. Cherington just tried to do the opposite of that. He moved an MLB pitcher for help at first base that he hopes will help for years to come. I'm not telling you one's right and one's wrong. I'm just saying, even if they try different things, the problem remains. And the only advantage the Pirates have is that they live in a much more winnable division. The stories aren't written, but we have reached the point in the story where the hero is supposed to fight back from the brink and triumph. Rarely does it play out like a superhero movie in sports, though. Sometimes it simply requires a new hero. I think ultimately both of these teams are going to have to change course. And the funniest thing is, the very best trade these teams might be able to propose to each other would be replacing their pro scouting and amateur scouting for 2 years. Maybe they could just swap and see if they could make a go of it from that. Thank you for making Locked On Pirates your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the all-new Locked On MLB Game Night. Every game, every night, all season long. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find MLB Game Night on Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts.